Ha Akabat El Broquil, and welcome to Shift F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, is a Catalan expression, meaning the broccoli is over, which is roughly analogous to the English expression, the jig is up. The jig may be up for one team's engines, which we will get to in the news. I also have no idea how to actually pronounce Catalan, so apologies to everyone. I'm Drew Scanlon. Joining me, Rob Zachney. How are you, Rob?
Not bad. For a minute there, I was like, what do you mean? It sounds like you said Catalan just fine. Obviously, the actual, Catalonian words. Now I understand.
Yes. Danny O'Dwyer is on assignment this week. But if you are new to this podcast, we want to wish you a very warm welcome. And if you are new to Formula One itself, we recommend listening to our preseason primer episode, which assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that, it's episode 257. Also, this show would not be possible without our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release ad-free versions of the podcast along with bonus podcasts and videos exclusively for our patrons that cover racing documentaries, rather. Too much Paso Robles Cabernet. Documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. This month, Rob, we have yet to be recorded Overtake, also yet to be watched by me. Anything spoiler-free you want to say about Overtake, the anime, ahead of our watch party?
The engine sound effects are really good, and I think you will appreciate them. It will make you nostalgic for old cell engines, though. If this is what Formula 4 sounds like, I gotta get down near that action.
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to it. Patreon.com/shiftf1 is where you can get in on that action. Like these fine folks, as part of our top tier of patronage, Get Rich or Die Ryan, Agave ATX, Cyphus Training, Turf SCS. By the way, that is not two different patrons. That is a hyphen between Cyphus Training and Turf SCS. A little behind the scenes for everyone. At Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army, at Talking Autos, Olivia Evans, TelemetryDeck.com, FTC, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foot, Abdullah Al-Thani, happy belated birthday, Jason Chadwick, yet again, Abraham Getchell, The Space Above Us Podcast, Bunny Fiend, Snigs, Alex Goucher, Max Voltar, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, William Rumpf, Irvine Clinical Research, Lachlan the Madden Man, Samurai Love Story, and Jason Kelly. Thank you to all of our patrons. We don't have a race to talk about that has happened. Instead, we have a race to talk about coming up. Before we get to that, we have some breaking news here. This is relatively new compared to when we usually source our news. I believe this broke today. An exclusive from Autosport, Rob. Alpine may be looking to abandon Renault engines, which is pretty crazy considering Alpine is Renault, meaning that they would become an F1 customer team in 2026. Right now, this is I don't know that I'd call it rumor territory, but maybe, Rob, you would know if there's a name for these sorts of words. I always look for the actual word that they're using to say. So here is Autosport understands that Alpine is considering abandoning its Works Renault engine. So has heard.
This, to me, this is as close as they can come to being like, we pretty much guaranteed that this is the team's at least strongly considering this. Okay. That the engine program is on life support. And like this is the sort of thing where just my expectations for how things like this would be sourced would be the editors would want to know who are the sources on this, how highly placed, to make sure these are the people who can speak to it. And they are all telling you this. And either, the editors want to see the, either listen to the conversations that were recorded, or they're going to want to see the exchange to make sure that the meaning could not be misinterpreted here, that you're not misrepresenting what these sources have told you. Because the last thing you want is like highly placed sources coming back and saying that's not remotely what I said. So like this is a pretty high confidence interval when it comes to reporting these things like this. You're just never going to get names attached to it, because at this level, like leaks like this, nobody's going to go on record about this until corporate comms have had a crack at whatever the official announcement is going to be. The thing you have to watch out for with stories like this too is sometimes there's strategic leaks, like as we saw with the Red Bull thing, where you will have factions within the company leaking things selectively to try to push an internal debate in one direction or another. That does not appear to be what's happening here. This appears to be there are sources at Alpine, as part of the Alpine program, basically saying they're strongly considering just dumping their engine program, which makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, so this is specifically, Autosport says that team principal Bruno Famine has been pondering the situation over recent weeks and has held talks with rival manufacturers to see what the alternative options could be. So this is, again, for the 2026 power unit, so not for next year. We talked a lot last week about the 2026 rules and how the power unit is changing. The interplay between the battery and the internal combustion engine is seeing a big shift in the ratio, more of a 50-50 as opposed to today's 80-20. So that's a big expenditure when you are, a company who is building this entire power unit engine for your Formula One team. So, and it hasn't really borne a lot of fruit for Alpine.
Quite the opposite. Like, this is a team that I think last year was begging for them to be allowed to do further development on their engine, or for the other engines. Sorry, this is what they're actually asking for other engines to be detuned so their power disadvantage went away. The engines are locked. They're supposed to be identical. Like multiple engine manufacturers in different cars, but like they're supposed to be equal in power. Alpine couldn't hit it. Even with the engine formula being under glass, Alpine never built an engine that was capable of being on an even footing with what Mercedes, Honda, Ferrari, couldn't do it. So it's humiliating to be in this position. And this is, we've talked about this. The Alpine program's a mess, and this just feels like further evidence that this is just not a serious program. This is a second-rate team tied to a first-rate name. Like, Renault's a huge manufacturer, but they have not been able to get any aspect of this program right, in the past several years. And now to be a major automotive manufacturer and say, we're done making our own engine. That's mortifying. Mortifying. Like, why are you even in the sport at this point? Not to make it all about, me and America and all this, but, this is such a classic, man, good thing we didn't get Andretti and its Cadillac performance connections in here, because, boy, F1's got to keep this, lame duck Alpine team happy. This is just a bad place to end up. It's a huge black eye for Renault. And I don't think other teams will be happy about this. The second half of this is so who's going to put the engine in these cars? Maybe they'll find somebody who's happy to do it. But if they don't, F1 can force someone to do it.
Yeah. So Autosport has a follow-up article here sort of laying out the rules that Formula One has in place that are meant to, if a team that exists in the sport can't produce an engine, the rules compel other power unit manufacturers to sell them one. There's a crazy formula to determine who that might be, or rather, as a result of this formula, it basically means that each engine manufacturer, has to be willing to supply up to 3 teams. And if the first one on deck, if a team doesn't have an engine, is the one supplying the fewest competitors. So that means it would be Honda and Audi. Although there is a stipulation that says that Audi wouldn't have to because they are a new power unit manufacturer. So this would really fall to Honda because right now it is only giving one engine or engines to one team, and that's Aston Martin.
And I could see that being really double-edged. Like, it could be Honda, but here, no, I take that back. I don't think Honda wants this shit because you're going to be putting your badge, your engine, in this Alpine car that's been crap for years in a program that's basically a dumpster fire. And so, like, sorry to Alpine fans who might be listening to this, though. I don't think in the history of the show I've ever encountered somebody who's like, I'm a big Alpine fan, which I think says a lot. Like, I think all the affection for that team went out the door with Cyril Abiteboul, who I think might have been an engine guy once upon a time. But either way, really, like, his tenure was marked by the decline of their engines. That's the falling out they had with Red Bull. But I don't think Honda will be happy about this because, we talked about this. Making these performance engines for racing series is historically not a profit center. It is a ton of labor. They are all custom-built machines. The margins are not actually awesome on doing this, and I'm being generous and assuming that it still comes out net profit, but I actually can't guarantee that is true. I think sometimes the manufacturers make noises that, every team that they are forced to take on ends up costing really more than it brings in just because of, like, there's no economy of scale with building these things. It's more work. It's harder. So I don't think this is going to be great news for Honda, which if Honda will be obligated to do it, but does that also maybe increase the risk of another engine manufacturer exit if they are being forced to, like, supply an effort they want nothing to do with, just to make their own partners happy?
Yeah, the article does point out that just because Mercedes is currently supporting three teams, which is the quote unquote maximum, that doesn't mean that they couldn't also do a fourth. So I don't know why they've singled out Mercedes here in this article, but they say that might also happen. And one could imagine that having to make your own engine anymore would free up a lot of budget to maybe go above and beyond and overpay for a Mercedes engine versus getting a Honda one.
I would have to look that up. I don't think you magically. I think they anticipated that, and I think they might have made it that if you're not building your own, there's like engine budget that exists separately from.
Oh, interesting.
Your I think they might have anticipated that somebody might sandbag in that way, where it's like, actually, we can spend more money on performance if we just buy someone else's engine. I actually don't think Alpine would get like more car development resources from this. The only benefit you get really is, like, I'm sure you do have some savings because there's a ton of engineers that you will no longer be supporting as part of this, but I don't think it's 1-to-1. So I think they would still be up a creek with the same paddle they've got, just with someone else's engine. And yeah, like, Mercedes kind of does seem the most likely because they were such a strong engine supplier these past few years. They might be the one engine manufacturer in F1 that you do have the feeling does have a bit of economy of scale going. They've kind of figured out how to mass produce these things. I don't know that the Honda engine, I think, has felt like they supply too few of them. Still feels like kind of a bespoke effort, and you have the weirdness with the Red Bull powertrains thing. But yeah, like, Mercedes seems like they'd make a lot of sense. It's just, I don't think F1 wants that, because at a certain point it becomes a bad look if it's like here's a bunch of cars running Mercedes engines and then some other guys. Yeah,
good point. All right, well, let's move on now. We brought up the 2026 rules. Rob, it's not a slam dunk here. They're not going down so well with everybody.
No, there's a quote I pulled from an analysis that Autosport wrote about this. basically that the rules have not been well received. I think we talked about, the fact that there's some quirks here where the cars will be kind of bad in corners and decent on straights, but like they're not going to be like as capable as the current F1 cars. So there's a quote here that I pulled from the team's perspective, although none of them will say this in public. There are several voices who say that F1 has ended up with unfinished rules by the 30 June deadline. We'll come to the importance of that in a moment, because the process to get there has not been as collaborative as they would have liked. Sure, the FIA asked teams for input and called on them for assistance with some simulations and simulator runs, but the flow of information was not as much as a two-way street as hoped. There were suggestions that the FIA did not always listen to advice, and warnings over car characteristics, like speed in corners or active aero, needed to be both front and rear. What some of them felt was an unachievable minimum weight limit, and aspects of the rules that are so prescriptive they leave little room for designer freedom. This is how, according to one source, we've ended up with the cars that are like dragsters on the straight and slower than Formula 2 in the corners. It's Formula 2.5. Now, I don't know if they flipped it around where like Formula 2.5 would be slower than Formula 2. But I think they might mean it's actually our mythical Formula 1.5 spec.
Right.
But the point stands that like the teams are not happy with the rule sheet that was handed out. Now, that June 30 deadline. So all of this up to June 30, this was all basically something that the FIA and their working group could promulgate as the new rules for F1, and I think be adopted as like a simple up and down majority vote, which is important because F1 teams historically have a hard time agreeing on things, so you want kind of a low bar to clear. The rules went over so poorly that a lot of teams felt, and it seems like the FIA also agreed, that they would all benefit from extending that deadline and reworking the rules. But extending that deadline required unanimous consent. Mercedes denied it and basically said, we're going to move ahead with the rules that we're going to move ahead with this June 30th deadline. So at that point, we like at least we're moving the conversation on. And Mercedes' argument was, who's to say if we give you an extension into the fall, who's to say we still don't have the situation where everyone hates the rules, but now we're out of runway, that we need to. The argument is that come the winter of 2025, as teams are getting ready for the 2025 season, they will also be beginning work on actually like fabricating their 2026 cars. So Mercedes' argument is we're basically there. We just need to hammer out these rules and keep moving. So this has all moved. This has become a little more challenging. Where from here, this rule, it seems like from here, amending these rules is going to get trickier and into actually a more contentious process, where it's going to fall under a scenario where it requires like unanimity from the F1 chiefs to like make major changes to these rules, which everyone kind of agrees the rules need major changes. I can't quite figure out if this basically means that like from Mercedes' perspective, it's basically fine if the rules suck as long as we just know what the rules are and we keep moving forward, or if this has actually raised the stakes of like a catastrophic failure of like adopting the new rules. I can't quite make that part out, but it is noteworthy that Mercedes kind of used its veto over extending the deadline so that teams couldn't veto the rules. Mercedes used its veto to block that, and now it's going to be a little bit harder for the FIA to reshape these rules that they've laid down that people are not very happy with. It's tricky. Like I still have a feeling that the people are probably being really harsh about the rules because everyone, like, you will always find people complaining about process in stories like this.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not as confident that where they ended up with the rules is as bad as people say. It just is a departure from what F1 teams have been set up to do for a while.
Yeah, and you got to imagine that the teams will, use every tool available to them to push things in a more favorable direction. So if they're like, this is going to be hard, we're going to say we don't like it, and try to get it changed. So, I'm having trouble determining whether it is that, if it is just like we want to make it the most advantageous to ourselves, or if they're not crying wolf and there is a potential for things to go totally sideways. Either way, I'm very curious to see how things turn out.
Yeah.
They've also, the FIA, changed another rule. They have lowered the super license age. So the F1 super license, this is what allows you to race in Formula One. The minimum age had been raised to 18 following Max Verstappen's entry to the sport at 17. They have updated the rules, Appendix L of the International Sporting Code of Formula One, specifically Article 13.1.2, for those following along at home. This reads now, at the sole discretion of the FIA, a driver judged to have recently and consistently demonstrated outstanding ability and maturity in a single-seater Formula car competition may be granted a super license at the age of 17 years old, a.k.a. the Andrea Kimi Antonelli rule. So now this would allow the Mercedes, beloved by Toto Wolff, current Formula 2 driver, Kimi Antonelli, to not only make a Free Practice 1 debut prior to his 18th birthday, which is on 25 August, but theoretically be able to race this season if it was so required. So how does this strike you, Rob? To me, it feels like it just smells of collusion. It probably isn't, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where if the door was open for Max to come in F1 at age 17, why should it be shut for later drivers? But I do think there's an element of, if I were the FIA, I would not want 17-year-olds in these cars. Mainly because you don't, again, sport's very safe. You don't expect anything to happen, but like, just from the perspective of like how this is all going to look, that is a 17-year-old kid. And if something goes bad, the reputational hit for these things is pretty bad. It's, prompts a lot of conversations you don't want to be having necessarily. Same way, like, major accidents in lower formula prompt a lot of conversations. These cars are faster. If I were also like an F1 veteran, I probably wouldn't love it, just because, it's competition is already fierce enough. I think the more incentive you give team principals to gamble on drivers who don't have much of a body of work, the more likelihood that you'll be squeezed out. But honestly, F1 seems to prioritize veterans to an almost ridiculous degree, so maybe that's a false concern. I don't know. I think for me, it's like, I haven't watched enough Formula 2 or lower Formula series to really have a feeling about this. Maybe Danny would. This Antonelli thing, they're talking about him like, he's the second coming, right? Like Hamilton even said, like, what direction did he think Mercedes should go? He's like, well, it's not my call, but if it was me, I would go with the youngster. There's a lot of people who've like sort of co-signed this. I don't know. To me, it does feel a little bit like that Max Verstappen, I should get me one of those. And I'm not sure that the secret was that like you just had to shake one out of the 17-year-old's box. I'm not sure that was the decisive factor.
Yeah, I mean they have built in some wiggle room for themselves. The FIA has, saying that it's sole discretion, demonstrated outstanding ability. That there's a fudge rule, or there's a fudge factor there, because this is from their perspective. It's the no scrubs rule, right? Like if there was some, driver with a lot of money coming in who's not actually that good, the FIA could say like, well, wait a minute, you crash a lot for safety reasons. We can't allow you until you're 18. So yeah, I don't know. Max Verstappen did all right.
He did.
All right, last one here, Rob. What news from the world of cinema?
So we've heard about this sort of Brad Pitt F1 movie that they've been shooting at various races now for the last year or so. It has a release date. It's going to be released in theaters and in IMAX, June 25th. Hold your applause. 2025. It's a ways off.
Exactly a year.
Yeah. Now I'm curious, like as we know, the track record for racing films is not amazing. We've had some really good ones, but it's a challenging sport to dramatize in a lot of ways. The funny thing was, I think when we talked about the Lewis Hamilton on Hot Ones, talking about them working hard to try to get the speed across in this film. I'm excited. I'm excited for that. I think it is such a challenge that nobody does productions like Frank and did with Grand Prix, right? Where it's like you're just gonna race a bunch of Formula 2 cars around and have specially designed race car, like touring cars, like chasing them with cameras. That's cool. I suspect they have not gone to those lengths. Now it's easier to have cameras and equipment that sort of fit onto small, like cars this size, but I am curious how ambitious has it been with like racing sequences.
Yeah, well, they were filming at Silverstone, right?
Yeah,
so there's hopefully
in Miami
that's right, yeah, hopefully there's some degree of authenticity there, but yeah, I eagerly await the trailer. Well, all right, that is it for news. We are going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with the track walk. And we're back. Welcome to the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalonia. It has been around since 1991. It was built during the build-up to the 1992 Olympics in Barcelona. The road team time trial cycling event was held there. It took over for Jerez, which had held the Spanish Grand Prix since 1986. And prior to that, from 1967 to 81, it bounced between Jarama, which is a circuit outside Madrid, and Montjuic, a street circuit in Barcelona, which honestly looks like a fun time. You should look that one up, Rob. It's pretty cool. It has undergone a few slight changes in track layout, most notably a chicane in the third sector, which F1 last used in 2022. The circuit currently hosts a number of other series, including MotoGP and the European Le Mans series, as well as actually continuing to host endurance cycling events, which actually I think ties into an email that we got this episode. It's also historically been used heavily for F1 testing, though Bahrain does take a big share of that now. Some memorable moments that have happened here. The inaugural race saw a duel between Ayrton Senna and Nigel Mansell. 94, Michael Schumacher drove half of the race in fifth gear and still came in second place. In 2006, Fernando Alonso became the first Spanish driver to win his home race. 2009, we talked about this a few episodes ago, saw an epic MotoGP duel between Valentino Rossi and Jorge Lorenzo. 2012, Pastor Maldonado's only win in Formula One, and this is the only one that I saw live. 2016, Mercedes drivers Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg took each other out on the opening lap, allowing Max Verstappen to get his first win in his first race with Red Bull, becoming the youngest ever race winner in Formula One. We will be here at least until 2026 when the Spanish Grand Prix moves to a new track in Madrid, which is a partial street circuit. But given Formula One's desire for stacking the calendar, that doesn't necessarily mean that Barcelona Catalunya is for sure going away. Some characteristics of the track. It's 4.7 kilometers or 2.9 miles long. We're going for 66 laps this weekend. One of the reasons it's good for testing is that it's got a great mix of straights and high and low speed corners, which also means that it especially rewards aerodynamic capabilities, which in turn means that wind can be a big factor here. It's got 2 DRS zones, one on the start-finish straight, and another in Sector 2 between turns 9 and 10. Turn 1 is a 90-degree right-hander at the end of a 1 kilometer long straight. So look for a big rush down there at the beginning of the race, and also look out for a lot of DRS passes into there. I'd say the real cornerstone of the track to me is turn 3, which is a just tremendously long right-hander that, if you've played the video game version of this track, you know is a lot trickier than it looks. It keeps going. Very easy to slide and cook your tires, but look out for some opportunists like Kevin Magnussen, maybe Fernando Alonso, to try some gutsy moves on this one. Turn 5 is also tricky since it's downhill, and I think it's off camber, meaning that the inside of the turn is higher than the outside, making it very easy to run wide. And turn 9 is also an important one since you have to really nail it in order to take full advantage of the back straight. But the exit is unsighted, so drivers basically have to just do it from memory. And this is another area where it's really easy to mess up and go wide. Last year, Verstappen won from pole with Hamilton and Russell rounding out the podium. Verstappen also set the lap record at that race with a 1 minute 16 second .330. There was actually a lot of overtaking last year, which is unusual for this track, with Russell and Sergio Perez both making up 9 spots from where they started, and a lot of midfield action in the first sector especially. Personally, I gave last year's race a 2 out of 4 and 2022's a 3 out of 4, so it can be entertaining, but maybe don't bet on it. We have a number of upgrades heading into this race. RB is going to have a quote-unquote major aerodynamic upgrade for both of their drivers, Tsunoda and Ricciardo. Mercedes has a few more updates coming, and Toto Wolff saying that they feel like they're understanding the car a lot more now. And then Williams, they have a big upgrade coming at the British Grand Prix, but from now until then, apparently they're adding some incremental upgrades. Yeah, Rob, what's your feeling on Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya?
I used to hate the circuit because it always showed up in every racing game, and I never felt good about it, particularly with that last chicane that they've since deleted. That last chicane always felt like it just ruined the rhythm of the lap. It was a weird, janky, almost felt like they just sort of cut a chicane out of what should have been a beautiful sweeping turn. Now that that's been addressed, and I've gotten more on terms with the course, I have come to like it. It's a good circuit. I think in part just because F1 is on a mission to just eliminate proper racing circuits from the sport as much as possible. Now I'm I really appreciate it for what it is. I think you're right. It has some really memorable corners. I've always felt, though, like the track being so technical does feel a little bit more like a competitive time trial at times rather than like a great venue for racing. We'll see how it goes this year. Like, my expectation going in certainly would be probably still favors Red Bull quite a bit, or at least favors Max quite a bit. The long straight means that the sort of the lack of dragginess on their car certainly seems like it would favor them, though McLaren has had demonic straight line speed in places, so maybe that'll work in their favor. I'm curious. Like, it arrives at a really interesting point in the upgrade cycle and just how the battle has been shaping up. Last thing about the circuit layout, if you go to the Williams YouTube channel, there's like a day with James Vowles type thing that they did much earlier this season, where part of it is he challenges Alex Albon to a sim rig F1 2023 battle, and Catalunya is the circuit they race on. And apparently James Vowles is very competitive, really gets into it. And he's actually doing really well holding his own against Albon until Sector 3, where he makes a sharp turn into the chicane. And Albon continues around the sweeping corner, which is now the track layout. And immediately Albon starts cracking up. He's like, "You took the chicane." And Val's like, I ran the track. We've been running for 12 years or whatever it is. It's a very funny moment, because like the old layout's still there. Like, if you're expecting that corner to be there, it is there. The only thing there's like maybe some traffic cones there to stop you going through, but it's all there. It calls to you if you're still sort of dealing with the internalized layout of the old track.
Yeah, I think MotoGP still uses that arrangement, which is why it has not been dug up or anything. All right, well, weather-wise, qualifying day at qualifying time looks to be just balmy, 73 degrees Fahrenheit or 23 Celsius. Precipitation sitting currently at 15%. And wind, like I said, can really impact you. We're looking at 10 miles an hour or 16 kilometers an hour. That I would classify as light. Sorry. All of that was for for race day. Qualifying day, similar wind, similar rain, higher temperature. So we're looking at 79 degrees Fahrenheit or 26 Celsius. It's probably a nice race to see in person. Heading into this race, the driver standings are thusly: Max Verstappen in first with 194 points. Charles Leclerc is in second with 138, ahead of Lando Norris in third with 131. Bit of a jump down to Carlos Sainz in fourth with 108. Sergio Perez, the other Red Bull, has 107 in fifth place. Oscar Piastri's in sixth with 81. George Russell's in seventh with 69. Lewis Hamilton is in eighth with 55. Fernando Alonso, the other hometown hero, in ninth place with 41 points. And Yuki Tsunoda, 10th place with 19. Stroll has 17. Ricciardo has 9. Oliver Behrman and Nico Hülkenberg both have 6. Pierre Gasly has 3. Alex Albon has 2, as does Esteban Ocon. Kevin Magnussen has 1. And then Zhou Guanyu, Valtteri Bottas, and Logan Sargent all still sitting with 0 points. In the constructor standings, Red Bull Racing is on top with 301 points. Ferrari is in second with 252. McLaren in third with 212. Mercedes is in fourth with 124 points. Aston Martin in fifth with 58. And we've got RB with 28. Gene Haas and team with 7. Alpine has 5. Williams has 2. And Sauber has 0. If you'd like to join the standings yourself, you could do so using the link in our show notes to join the official Shift+F1 Fantasy League. And you can also send us an email, shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. We've got a number of emails here to read. Rob, should I take this first one here from Casey?
Absolutely.
All right, so speaking of cycling, Casey writes, me and my cycling buddies had a great laugh at the surprisingly accurate description of Bottas doing a 100-mile Tough Mudder on bicycles. If you're interested in a more nuanced description of Unbound, here you go. Gravel racing is done on mostly road bikes modified to handle gravel and dirt roads. If rally car is mountain biking, gravel is taking an Indy car and putting rally tires and gearboxes on it. All right, you've sold me. The event that Bottas did last week is by far the biggest and most prestigious gravel event in the cycling world. But he didn't do the marquee version. There is a 350-mile version, which is borderline another sport. The 200-mile Unbound race is the big deal super prestige one. The 100-mile race is still legit, but not the tops. It is still super competitive, and doing well in an age group is still a great feat. But the people comparing him to a pro cyclist are way off. That is from Casey. I have done one 100-mile ride in my entire life, and it was flat the whole time and on roads. I can't imagine doing 100 miles on gravel,
Did you find that a little
let alone
boring
a
as
350.
somebody who does like cycling in the Bay Area?
Sorry?
Did you find that a little boring as like a Bay Area cyclist?
Yes, but the thing that was a killer was because it was all flat. It was in Sacramento. You don't ever get out of the saddle, and therefore you don't shift your body as much, and so you just like a lot of stuff cramped up. And I eventually learned to like, okay, I need to start standing up and like do some stretches while I'm on my bike just to change the muscles up because it would get painful.
This description though, like, this is a great sales pitch. Like, if rally car is mountain biking, gravel is taking an Indy car and putting rally tires and gearboxes on it. Okay, hang on, you have my attention.
There's another one called, I think, the Giro.
Yeah.
Which is
isn't that the big Italian race?
If it's what I'm thinking of, it's on road bikes, but it's all on like cobblestones. Is that okay? I don't think the cobblestone one is the Giro, but there is I think it's what I'm thinking of is a French one that is all on cobblestones, and you can imagine there's no shocks on road bikes. Yeah. Bike people are crazy, whether powered or non.
Yeah, it seems like, how can we take this like eminently efficient, practical tool and just like turn it into a torture device?
Yes. You want to take this next one?
Yeah, Chris writes, so I'm by no means a grizzled vet, but this year marked the third time my father and I attended the Canadian GP.
Oh, wow.
Was lucky enough to get tickets post-COVID, as many people probably got for all races in lieu of the Drive to Survive effect. This year was the first time where we collectively agreed that next year we give the tickets to friends and take a year off. Reasons. 1, it has rained every single year. This year was the worst, with no shelters around the park and hail coming in on Friday.
Oh, boy.
2, they started to do a concert this year with Mr. Worldwide, Pitbull.
Mm-hmm.
In a money grab attempt, you don't get access to the concert if you have passes for the race. Instead, you get out of qualifying on Saturday to an even more bottleneck situation to get to the metro, the only station on or off the island. It took us 2+ hours of walking from our seats to actually getting on the metro, all in the driving rain.
Oh, man.
3, I believe they started to oversell and add more seats to the grandstands. We were packed in there worse than sardines, and this led to fights happening with little for the high school aged attendance to do.
Wow.
Besides that, it's been race-wise. Not sure if this helps you guys with understanding the fan perspective, albeit one fan's perspective. Keep up the awesome work. So, this dovetails so well with, like, I think we talked about this after the Canadian Grand Prix. F1, like, reprimanded the circuit organizer for the fact that, like, the ground's flooded. It flooded tents that the teams were using. Like, there were there was a track invasion immediately after the checkered flag, which, you know, happens in some places, but, like, the important part is that it's planned, right? Like, if fans are coming out on the track, that needs to be a thing that people understand is happening, and there's accommodations for it. The organizers basically lost control of the site, and didn't have procedures in place to make that workable. So, like, the Grand Prix organizer, not super in the good books of F1 right now. Now, admittedly, is there a bit of, are race promoters a little bit like the king's wicked advisors that can be the people who can be blamed for F1 basically putting them in a box where it's like, here's what costs to host an event. How you arrive at that is up to you. But yeah, no, this sounds like a quintessential, like, I love F1. I wouldn't pay F1 prices to go have a miserable goddamn time. This sort of seems like a quintessential, like, maybe, think about other races that might be in your neck of the woods or accessible. Because, it does feel like we get some really magical fan experiences that people write in about with races they've gone to. And we get some things that, basically sound like Milgram experiments, right? Where it's like, what's going to happen if we put all these people under this duress? Whereas it does feel like consistently we tend to get a lot of emails from people who went to like IndyCar or like road racing events or even a lot of your like NASCAR events and come away having a great time. And I do think over time, like, this is probably something F1 wants to watch out for. Like, that being packed into a claustrophobic grandstand sounds miserable.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, you're paying so much more for F1 races, for F1 tickets, than you are NASCAR, for instance.
Yeah.
It's got to be held to a higher standard. You want, theoretically your audience to have a much better time. So, yeah, that's disappointing to hear. Hopefully Canada can turn it around.
You want to read this? You want to read this next one about maybe cash grabs?
Yeah, sure do. This is unsigned. Maybe we'll figure out why. This email goes, "Guys, I did a thing. I tasted the flames of the fire of the burning sun. Amateurs would think that a fashion icon like Lewis Hamilton would be the first F1 driver to have his own designer shoe, or they'd guess a sneakerhead like Pierre Gasly would take a stab at a collab drop. But they are all wrong because the Phoenix himself blessed us with a pair of NFT, that's right, enabled sneakers. From pull tabs made out of race car seatbelt to inspiring words of resiliency, I now belong to an exclusive club of the fans of Romain Grosjean. Among many perks, I will now get a chance to hop on Zoom with the celebrated driver and even receive access to meet and greets at the supported Indy races. I feel special. Jokes aside, the pair is actually decently comfortable, and the materials are comparable to many pairs of general release Jordans I have. Add this to the growing list of F1 current and former driver products, and at once, this one actually struck a chord with me and will now enjoy the company of 70 plus kicks I have in my collection. Welcome home, the Phoenix." They also send a link, since I assume you already have your credit card in hand, ready to join me at the Phoenix Lounge. And Rob, you sent me a picture of these.
And sorry, the email is just signed T. So
T. Okay.
Thanks, T.
Thank you, T.
What do you think of these? What do you think of these sneaks?
I think they're all right. I'm not a sneakerhead, but
I like them. Like, that's the problem. It kind of works.
Yeah, they remind me a little bit of Marty's sneakers in Back to the Future 2, in a good way. I like the side view better than the front-on view. I'm not sold on the black. And it does just say the word resilient there on the heel. It does say the Phoenix. Okay, I'm back in. Yeah.
Right, and like the little like the little like extra red stitching to a whole, like there's some neat little touches here. I kind of dig it. I think it is better than I would have expected. Now, I am very curious what the fuck NFT enabled sneakers means. That just sounds like words.
Well, I imagine that the Zoom with him and access to the meet and greets, I imagine that is what the NFT is conferring. I'm curious. Yeah.
I don't know, but I I don't know. Yeah, they're equipped with an NFC chip. Maybe T got it crossed up. They're not like NFT sneakers. Maybe there's an NFC chip. What does the NFC chip get you?
Maybe you have to scan your shoes when you go to the Phoenix Lounge.
That seems like the thing, right? That like bearer of the sneaker, beep, you go in.
Yeah. I'm gonna follow this link. I'm going to do so with JavaScript turned off. The website is a .io domain, so I would be willing to bet that this is indeed an NFT thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it doesn't say on the website.
I don't, Yeah, I mean, for $250? For $250? That's not bad.
Are they still on sale?
According to, I'm gonna click buy now.
Okay.
It seems like I can probably just buy these.
Okay. With US dollars?
Looks
Not
like
Ethereum?
Nope.
Okay.
So, now I need to sleep on that decision.
They do look pretty good.
What if we all got matching Phoenix sneakers? We could be the Phoenix boys.
I mean, then we could all roll up to the in-person meetup and do an impromptu podcast with the Phoenix.
We could.
Indy 500 exclusive meet and greet before the race. If Roman Grosjean wins the Indy 500, you receive a custom Roman Grosjean windbreaker.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be like a cheap ass bomber jacket. That's gonna be a piece of crap.
Oh yeah,
like okay, they're gonna be. They will have no plan in place. Like, oh shit, he won. You're not getting the cool windbreaker out of that deal. This is neat. I don't know. It's not bad.
I'm putting the link in the show notes.
Yep.
Great. Thank you, T.
All right, so our final email comes from Pasco. This weekend saw the 92nd running of Les 24 Heures du Mans. For the first 91 of those, I think it's Dumas actually. For the first 91 of those races, no more than 2 cars have ever finished on the lead lap. Many of those years would see a single car finish many laps ahead of the competition. In more competitive years, a couple of cars from the same manufacturer would run to the same distance. On 6 very, very special occasions, 2 cars from 2 different manufacturers have finished on the lead lap. In what is undoubtedly the greatest ever running of the event, the 2024 edition saw 9 cars from 4 manufacturers, all taking the checkered flag on the lead lap. Having 9 cars on the lead lap in a race which has never seen 3 is absolutely bananas. So, a question. Given the hypercar formula is evidently the greatest set of motorsport regulations ever implemented, a success that makes the former champion, British touring cars in the 1990s, look positively quaint, what should the F1 rule makers learn from it? Neum Bosco. So, wow. Le Mans was great this year. It ruled. Okay. Like, hands
I didn't
down.
Watch it.
So, it had one part that was not great, which was during the overnight portion, it started to rain. And it did not look like it was raining particularly heavy to me. Like it was not a small amount of rain, but they safety carred the race for 4 hours, running behind safety car with no real accidents that they were dealing with. It was just like 4 hours under safety car in like rainy, but did not seem like particularly extraordinary conditions.
Oh, wait a minute. I think I saw something about this. Didn't they have to refuel the safety car?
Yeah. I believe they did. They've got 3 safety cars for each class, I think, so they were able to sort of like have them roll on, roll out. Maybe they have extras, I don't know. But it was with that bit aside, there was a lot of really good racing, including the first half of the race was really defined by Robert Kubica going on a tear. It was such a compelling story because like throughout the race, conditions kept changing. Like it was always like threat of rain or it's rained a little bit, and almost never, except for that overnight stint across the full course, it kept like the rain kept like winging the course. So you'd have half of it like getting a pretty significant rain shower, and then half of it not. And in those really like tricky conditions, a bunch of cars panicked. They went onto wet tires. Kubica stayed out on slicks and just went on a tear and took his. There were 3 Ferraris in the race, 2 a Ferrari factory entry, and then Kubica was driving AF Corsa, and that is I think an American like customer team that was running. And they had a beautiful canary yellow, Ferrari out there. And he had that thing comfortably in the lead. He was leading the race. And safety car aside, it really did look like his team was in kind of a commanding position, at least as far as the first half of the race went. And then as the nature of Kubica watch tends to go, things were derailed by an unfortunate incident. In this case, kind of his own making.
Oh, no.
Overtaking lapped traffic. He was overtaking a hypercar, the ill-fated BMW hypercar. I'm not sure I've seen them have a single good race. And then both of them were overtaking a GT3 car, much, much slower. Rather than wait for them both to get past the GT3, Kubica decided to thread the needle and go center line between the 2 cars. And then he sort of tugged it right at the last second, clipped the BMW, sent it into a high-speed accident to knocked it out of contention, and triggered a safety car that like deleted a ton of the advantage that the 83 AF Corsa Ferrari built up, that basically like deleted the lead that Kubica had won earlier in the race. And then when the safety car was cleaned up, they hit him with a 30-second stop and go.
Oh.
Their positioning in the race was so good that didn't necessarily mean they were cooked. Like, it dropped them back into contention and like took them outside a leading candidate to win, but like it wasn't necessarily a death blow to the race. And maybe it's mooted anyway because like the car ended up having to retire much later in the race. But like, for a few hours there, it was like you remembered, man, like Kubica in his element, exciting guy to watch. And then the race was like Toyota, has sort of been beleaguered in this new era. Came battling back. The factory Ferraris ended up having a great race, but kept trying to find ways to let it slip through their fingers, racking up penalties, having weird shit happen, like a door breaking open during the race, and them trying like race control. Wouldn't call them in as one of the drivers is like reaching across the cockpit and holding the door shut. Just great stuff all around. Like, genuinely, I think I watched that thing with the exception of the safety car and a few places. Like, I would say 24-hour race, it probably had like 17 hours of like really good racing.
Wow.
It was extraordinary. Highly recommended. One of the best 24-hour races I've seen. I do think it misses a little something from like the absurdity of when you would have like the Audi and Porsche programs just throwing all their R&D at the problem and just like creating these like super weapons. But the problem with that has always been the LMP1 class, the Le Mans prototype that the hypercar replaced, never had more than a couple credible entries because it was so expensive. It was basically like, which auto manufacturer is going to light the GDP of a small country on fire to win this race? And then the second team stops winning, they pull out. Once competition showed up, it's like, well, we've already bagged a bunch of trophies, And now we're gonna continue spending a fortune to get beaten by someone else who showed up to burn a ton of money. So no, we're not gonna stick around. The hypercar has been to solve that. We talked about this on the show a couple years ago. The hypercar format was going to unify IMSA's like prototype high-end performance rules and WEC's. So like interchangeable spec, so teams can run in the 24 hours and like compete in the two series without having to adapt to two wildly divergent specs. And then it is undeniably a less demanding spec that a lot of manufacturers are there to hit. Now, to why I think Pasco's a little bit full of it here.
It does seem a little tongue-in-cheek, but yes.
All these cars are they're brought together because they balance a performance to the shit out of that field. Which is why you get awesome things like these guys are running a V6, but these guys are running a V6 turbo. These guys are running a naturally aspirated V8. It's madness out there. Just dogs and cats living together. And it's because WEC, FIA, whoever is in charge of the actual like balance performance regulations, they are making it so that these cars are all basically on a very even footing when it comes to competition. Max Verstappen actually he made a comment about this. You know, talking about his interest is very high in doing the 24 hours. You know, he did the virtual 24 hours this past year. And he's had some outreach to compete in it, but he's like, I'm not sure I would like it because it is so balance performance heavy. He's not sure it would really suit him, but also it disadvantages the way he laid it out. The thing that actually balances this sort of balance performance by converging the performance of the cars so closely, the thing it actually privileges a lot too, is the more a rider can be like a horse racing jockey, small and light. There's no counter to that. He was like, if I show up and I weigh like, 80 kilos or something, I'm actually going to be at disadvantage to the tune of a couple tenths a lap, just because like I'm going to be weighing more than some of the other guys who were in that series because they don't have a minimum driver weight. Was what he laid out, which I can't believe, because like F1 had to solve this problem because you had drivers basically going on like crash diets to try and lower their weight and allow the teams a little more selection of where they wanted to put ballast. But like the hypercar format, I think it has done exactly what it was intended to do, which is it put manufacturers, it gave them a series that did not cost them that much to run, would be a great showcase for their R&D, but wouldn't actually necessarily require that much R&D. And they would all look good because balance of performance would make it so. And so everyone gets to take part, and everyone looks like they have the capability of producing one of the most advanced pieces of racing machinery in the world. But that is where that's where the comparison with F1 really falls apart. F1, I think everyone has known some kind of balanced performance or ballasting or something there's a lot of ways you can brute force a field to be more competitive and more in contention. It's just anathema to F1. This is one of the things they've brought up with the new regulations for 2026. It is imperative to them that they are the fastest racing cars in the world. They've got to be the fastest cornering, not necessarily the fastest in a straight line, but just over the types of tracks that F1 races on, they have to be the dominant class and no balance performance. So, there you kind of have it. I think the way to get everyone bought in is kind of give them you can't lose proposition.
Wow. I mean, that sounds great. I'll see if I can find maybe a YouTube highlights or something. Put it in the show notes. But yeah. Thanks, Rob. That's great. Shift+F1 podcast at gmail.com or f1.cool/emails is the email ingress points. You can also hit us up on the socials, which are linked in the show notes. That is us around the internet. Now let's take it around the world. We have a lot of support series with Formula One this weekend in Barcelona. Formula 2, Formula 3, and the Formula One Academy. We've got the NASCAR Xfinity Series at the New Hampshire Motor Speedway in, is it Loudon?
I think it's Loudon.
Loudon. For the Sci Apps 200. 1P in apps. Not sure.
Sounds like PsyOps.
It's Sci Apps. I mean, I'm not sure. The IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship is at Watkins Glen International in Watkins Glen, New York, for the Salen's 6 Hours of the Glen. We've also got the IndyCar Firestone Grand Prix of Monterey at Laguna Seca in beautiful Salinas, California. The NHRA is at Virginia Motorsports Park in Petersburg, Virginia, for the Virginia Nationals. We've got Super Formula at Sportsland Sugo, which is in the town of Murata, Shibata District, Miyagi Prefecture in Japan. And we got NASCAR. Also at the New Hampshire Motor Speedway for the USA Today 301. Do you get your copy delivered to your doorstep, Rob?
Wait, is that what that is?
The USA Today? Yep. 301. USA Today is sponsoring.
Okay, got it.
Formula One also is happening this weekend. Free Practice 1 kicks off Friday, June 21st at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPN2, followed by Free Practice 2 at 11 a.m., also on ESPN2. Saturday, June 22nd sees Free Practice 3 kicking off at 6:30 Eastern on ESPN2, followed by qualifying at 10 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPN2. The race, everyone, Sunday, June 23rd at 9 a.m. Eastern on ESPN. And that's what's up for the Spanish Grand Prix. Final thoughts, Rob?
All right, I have two. One last thing I forgot to mention about the 24 hours. Alpine sucked. Sorry, I just have to say that. It was like, oh, this is the entire program. Like, it looked... Drew, different series, different cars, still looked like the same team. Same shit was happening.
Oh, man.
Cars didn't work. Cars not good. That wasn't great. The other thing is, I can't believe I forgot to mention this. The McLaren effort in IndyCar, I cannot... Look, I don't think sociopath is a word we should use lightly or throw around, or even necessarily use that pejoratively. But it is increasingly the word that seems to most describe how Arrow McLaren is operating in IndyCar with regard to drivers. Just to give you a summary, David Malukas was a really promising driver in IndyCar, had an off-season he signed with Arrow McLaren, not necessarily because they lost Alex Palou, who decided at the last minute not to go over there. But he was a promising prospect. They wanted him. He broke his wrist in a cycling accident. Arrow McLaren cut his contract. They were like, yeah, this ain't going to work. Sorry about your wrist. We can't wait. So you're done. You're not going to be a McLaren driver. Goodbye. Instead, it's going to be Teo Pourchaire. Formula 2 driver from last couple of years, really, really good. Had some really good outings as a stand-in for Malukas at Arrow McLaren. Was there long enough to be harassed by Augustine Canapino's apparently rabid, unhinged fan base. This, today, I couldn't believe it when I was going through stories. They dumped Teo Pourchaire. Despite him not having a bad season, he's just gone. He's done. Arrow McLaren then signed Nolan Siegel, who's been a leading Indy NXT prospect, backed by some serious family money. And I think was part of a Le Mans winning. I think his LMP2 team might have won at Le Mans this past weekend, but like this was not it was not like Teo Purcher was like the acting Arrow McLaren driver. They were pretty unequivocal. He was their guy for the season. Congrats, Teo. You're going to be racing at Arrow McLaren in IndyCar for 2024. And then they just rug pulled him and put in Nolan Siegel, who doesn't seem like a bad kid. But increasingly, it does seem like either Zach Brown or the people managing Arrow McLaren in IndyCar are bad people. It's unbelievable the degree to which they have weaseled out of contracts and used I can't believe Purcher signed a contract that didn't have a like massive break clause, but maybe had no leverage as somebody who's just eager for the seat. But like Racer's coverage of this is like Purcher blew up his racing calendar to be an IndyCar driver for the rest of this year. You know, guys like this are always rotating between different series. You have different opportunities. He committed to Arrow McLaren, and they pulled this shit.
Man. Crazy.
Yeah.
IndyCar popping off. Again, if we didn't have full-time jobs, there's probably room for an IndyCar podcast out there.
Hey, folks, if you would, I'd just be curious what the financials of an IndyCar podcast would be. I'm just asking questions. But I do think, because like the last thing is Nolan Siegel was the guy who filled in for Agustin Canapino during his suspension by the team. So yeah, this stuff is just wild, and IndyCar's in this weird place. I think the other bit of news from them this past week was I didn't read the details too closely, but I think they're going to leave NBC and go be broadcast on Fox, but I think the contract stipulates it's going to be national over-the-air broadcasts.
Oh, wow.
IndyCar, which is like huge.
Like the old days.
Yeah, IndyCar hasn't been a major over-the-air sporting event since the 90s, where you have Paul Page like calling those races for ABC. So like, you know, I think this is why the sport was like not going to look too hard at anything the Penske team may have done. Because like this is the sort of thing where like you could basically be like, yeah, we cheated, and what are you going to do about it? Because in the end, it's like, well, if Roger brought national TV broadcasts back, who are we to complain?
Yeah, man. Always something interesting in the wide world of sports. If you would like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes, the ad-free version of the podcast, and the official Shift+F1 Discord, you could do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.
Except it's a bus, and McLaren is throwing yet another driver under.